Now, we would like to invite Professor Thomas Kvan, Dean, School of Design, Southern University of Science and Technology, to share on designing for digital transformation. Please join me in welcoming Professor Thomas Kvan.
Good morning. I want to thank Pavel for his presentation because it reminds us just how powerful art is and how powerful the visual aesthetic is to help us understand the world we are in and the potential of the world we might be in. And I'm going to build off that. Now, my work is not as visually as attractive. This is not artwork. I am an academic. I'm an architect by background. But I have, therefore, an academic's perspective about the opportunities and challenges of the future. But as you will see, I think there's a remarkable potential that we must engage in. I'm old enough to remember this. Certainly when I was being educated into design, I was educated into that future. And if you, at the top left is the General Motors workshop, drawing office where they were drawing cars. On the right, a typical architect's office. Typical in the architects were the poor people who had to cram as much possible into a piece of real estate. And on the bottom were the urban designers. The reason I chose these were the issues of scale. The car is one scale, but you see the way they're working, large rolls of drawing, big sheets, architects working crammed together in a bigger scale, but urban designers working at a scale which is so vast that they have to lie on the floor and crawl around on the piece of paper with their pencil in order to put marks on the drawing. This world was one which was challenging to work with, and there were physical constraints which constrained your ability to conceptualize a future. Because if you're crawling on the floor with a pencil and a ruler, you're limits to what you can talk about. In the 1960s, engineering took the leap and started powering along with computational tools to describe volumes, surfaces, which could not be described except in analog way. You know how car designers work. They use a big block of clay and then they cut it until they can cut the shape that they want. And then they test the shape for aerodynamics and structures and the likes. And in 1965, this was the first car ever designed and produced that used the surface modeling technology of engineering. And it could be cut directly in the clay robotically. 1965. This is the history of my experience, almost, in the design world. Going from light pens on cathode ray tubes through to personal computers and the interactive systems that where you could engage with the machine. At the end of that period, I was writing software for designers and architects to work on those machines and larger machines. And after that, we had the big software change. Initially, it was the hardware change. Then the software change came. And we went from being able to create models, three-dimensional models, which projected out the necessary paper documentation to build in a traditional way, because we're communicating with the past from the future. The future is the 3D model. The past is the paper documentation legally required so someone can go out on site and build something, or go out on a machine floor. Then there was the integration of the data, and then finally, in more recent time, is the use of data to drive the design. And that's a profoundly different change from these people crawling around on the floor with a pencil and a ruler trying to describe the future. So you're gathering data, and through your scripting, you're generating output. The reason I want to cover that is I think it's important to remember how technology threatens designers. This was terrifying. When this came out, it was absolutely terrifying to the design community. Because all of a sudden, anybody could buy a machine, get a piece of software, put it on their machine, and they would become the designer. The architecture community globally was absolutely paralyzed at that point. I remember at one point, Good Home magazine came out with all their usual monthly glossy pictures of wonderful mansions. But inside, they had a free piece of software. And everyone thought that was the end of architecture. Every architecture office was shut down because people would get the magazine, get the free software, and you could load it in your computer. You could design your own home. It would specify the washing machine, the refrigerator, the kitchen equipment. You could do a 3D model of your house, and you could just give it to a builder and say, build me this house. There were some houses built that way. They're all uniformly awful. They're bad design. Because what the world forgot was the design was not the technology of crawling on the floor and drawing with pencil on a piece of paper. Design is what goes on up here. And that did not come free in the magazine. What the computer did was to enable us to go into a totally different realm of design. We could do things we could not do. So geometrically we could do it, but also in terms of the manufacturing. So this is the old part. Hong Kong played a big part in this. I was at Hong Kong U through this period, where we were running global design studios. We were the first people in the world to network with ETH in Zurich, UBC in Vancouver, and our students were working with Canadian students and Swiss students on these projects which ran 24 hours a day. This is before the internet. It was a rather difficult thing to do. But we were doing it, and in Hong Kong, the construction of the airport was one of the many projects of that period where they used these technologies to great advantage. So, what happened in that period was design changed. Designers had to rethink what they did. They were no longer making the final outcome of one thing. They were beginning to integrate a process. And you see this in the way design practices changed. Practices changed from delivering a single product to delivering complex services, many of which had the word strategy in them. This is useful to think about when we're thinking about the context of an association like this and an award ceremony tonight. What is a design? What is a designer doing that constitutes a design? IDEO were famous for their first computer mouse for Apple. But today, what does IDEO do? They are engaged with, ethically, in delivering an AI-supported platform to help students learn in the classroom. And that's what a designer does as well. So if you'd have a design competition, where would something like this fit in a design competition? But essentially what a designer does. And why is that? Well, it's because of this. See, design used to be the outcome of a craft process. A designer was a crafter. But today, design has evolved. Everything is evolving. We're not in a static world. That's why we've come to AI. So design is now what I term a meta-discipline. A discipline is chemistry or physics. Meta-disciplines span between disciplines, and that's the great power of design. So designers are meta-disciplinary actors using knowledge across many different realms. We're not just making one thing, we're integrators. Design is not problem solving anymore. What we're trying to do is discover opportunities. What can we do which no one else can see? What can we do to make a better future which no one else could possibly deliver, except me as the designer in this context? And we do it by reframing. We do it by challenging how we're looking at something and turning it around and looking at it differently. Artists do this in the most brilliant way. Designers do it as well. And that's where the artwork we saw from Powell was so powerful, because it makes you rethink a spatial experience and makes you reconceptualize how you live in a spatial world. So, industry around the world is beginning to wake up to this. And so in the United States, for example, the Design Management Institute tracked the stock market, and they tracked those companies which use design consciously versus those companies which do not bother with design. And the companies that use design consciously, their stock value went up faster than the other companies. Everyone knows the famous stories now, but it's useful to think about that out here. I'm sitting in Shenzhen, where it is not so obvious. I use this model a lot, and it's created by the Danish Design Center, and it helps to explain how design changes its value and position in different economies. So as you go up through the maturity ladder, design appears within the company's products as styling. Then it gets integrated as a process in the product, but later it becomes the core strategy for the company. And you know companies that do that. Just look at your mobile phone. Those companies do that. The challenge in Shenzhen and in much of China is that we are locked here at the lower end of that scale. Design, if it's present, is done, applied as a decoration, a styling on top of a product. And that's not where the value is realized. What we know is that companies and economies that use design as a core value generate more income and return value, capture the value. I come from Denmark originally. Denmark's a tiny country. It has a population smaller than Hong Kong. It can't manufacture things, but what it does is it captures value through design. Even in such companies as Novo Nordisk, which is now making a big success out of chemicals that make you lose weight. Novo Nordisk uses design as an approach to chemical manufacturing and delivery. So, what does AI do for us? Well, it can help us with the process, it can help us with the product. You can speed things up, you can increase the professional workflow, you can add to the competence, you can bring in new experiences in the product, and it enables our curiosity. That's where we are at the moment. In the last 3 years, when AI exploded onto this, the large language model AI exploded into the marketplace, that's where we have been. So we use AI extensively through my school, and I won't go through this, but we use it for exploring outcomes, for delivering work faster, but also to enhance the learning of a student so that the student can use it for reflection and rethinking what they're learning. We're one of the 20 schools in China, therefore, that have been identified by Alibaba as leading in the area of AI and design. So we are part of the group called the D20, where we get together and talk with Alibaba about how design and AI are being influenced. I put this up. This is my colleagues. I started the school from zero in 2020. There were nobody, no faculty, no students, no building. And I assembled a team which has this complement. You'll see that they come from all over the world. But if you look very closely, you'll see there's a musician and a composer. There's a philosopher. I've got 2 mathematicians. I've got computer scientists, as well as industrial designers and interaction designers. Why do I have that as a design school? We were looking at the future of design, and the future of design is about this, the sensory experience of the world, the interaction with that sensory experience of that world, and then delivering that in a tangible and intangible way. And therefore, my students must be able to do that fluently. My students are all from a science technology background. I want to take you through some work very quickly. This is by one of my colleagues who has an undergraduate degree in mathematics and a doctorate in industrial design. He's very interested in interaction. He does the interaction design for phones and for products. So he's working on the mathematical representation of interaction all the way through to innovating on screen interaction techniques. He has created a board game to help people learn about this and also describe it. He's created, from that symbolic language of the mathematics of interaction, an AI tool that can take the symbolic representation and just churn out the code. So in other words, you can work out what kind of interaction you want, describe it mathematically, put it into the AI, it spits out the code, and you can test it on the screen. Instead of waiting a week while someone figures out how to do the coding, it now just happens quickly. And that means the designer no longer is stuck by the technology. They're engaging directly with it. So the AI is embedded into this tool to translate the designer's thought through symbolic representation onto a screen they can test. Another colleague of mine, he has an industrial design background, both undergraduate and PhD from Delft. And he is very interested in this issue about how design supports mental well-being. And so he's researching the issues of mental well-being and how engagement can, with something can improve your mental well-being. So he's working with autistic children. And he's developed this game, which is a tangible board game, which enables autistic children to practice social interaction. And they physically experience the challenges of social interaction and negotiation through the game. So this is a game design, but it's done using AI to support the design process. He has also created another game, and this is one is on screen for school children to deal with the stress that school children in China experience at a very, very young age and the pressure they're under. So he's created an interactive game to allow children to express their emotions. This is An Pengcheng, who also has an industrial design background, but he is working much more on education. So he uses AI to embed it into an art therapy system. He's been working with the Canadian Art Therapy Association to create tools that are people who want to use art therapy can practice on and work with, and then AI is responding to them and giving them feedback as they do their artwork. He also has created a game, again, for autistic children, a different strategy, which was using the tool to create a social experience for the child, which embeds the child's inventions, drawings, captures the drawings, puts them into the game, and then creates situations they have to work on. Another tool for AI is by Xiao Ruowei. And Ruowei is a computer scientist, initially, who works on interaction of things, but she also has an undergraduate degree in art. And so she has been writing computer code that and is working with an artist, so that the large language model has read all of the input from the artist and is then creating artistic output with the artist in her own language. So she creates paintings like this, and the AI system turns those into immersive 3D environments which the user can then interact with. So she's taking static two-dimensional art and turning it into immersive 3D art. And that's been exhibited in Shenzhen. This is my colleague, Wan Fan, who is a mathematician and has a PhD in mathematics. But she works with large data models and robotics, and she's particularly engaged in soft robotics and underwater robotics. But how do you engage with robotics and control the robot when you're in a hostile environment many meters underwater? So, and then my school is also working with the School of Medicine to create a whole environment for different kinds of support for medical care and medical care delivery. So as designers, we're using our approach for design to think about the other experiences in life, not simply making products. So I had that list earlier with 7 items on it, and I add one more thing that AI has brought to us, is to augment our intelligence in design. And that's really the core of it. So you go back into 1960s, where I started with all of the computer tools, we were limited by the pencil and the ruler. It was very difficult to embed our design intelligence into the outcomes. AI is helping us do that. So AI is helping us invent the futures for others. That's what designers do. We don't make products. We create other people's futures. And so we have to do that by moving beyond problem solving and must reframe. This is particularly challenging when the demographics are changing. This is meant to be an animation, but it's not working here. But everyone knows the demographic profile of the world is changing. Africa is growing. China is shrinking dramatically. Europe has already shrunk. When you think about designing for the future, you must design for the future demographic, not today's demographic or yesterday's. So my school has this very complex explanation, but you'll see in the center is this blue material. At the right-hand side, it's designed for good. That's what my school is using AI for, is using computer technology for. We are focused on the future of design and the design for good by bringing in technology, products, manufacturing, and knowledge to one end. So the future is yesterday in my mind. In other words, what is tomorrow depends upon your past, but what you do as a designer for tomorrow, you've already started doing yesterday. So we must be able to use our capabilities. AI is embedded in the past because it uses statistical models to predict possible associations. That's how it works. So it's very much embedded in the past. But us as designers are always working in the future. It's a challenge then of how we reconcile those two together. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kvan.